Event organizers, get ready to level up. You're listening to the Event Academy Live podcast, where we elevate motivated event organizers. This podcast is brought to you by Fusion, all the event ticketing features and support you need for one low price. Check them out at getfusionsolutions.com. Now, it's time for your host, Jake Spurley.
Hey there, and welcome back to another episode of Event Academy Live. I'm your host, Jake Spurley. In this episode, we're going to be talking about how to make your vendors and exhibitors happy if you're an event that has booths. As some of you know, some of you might not know, in a previous life, let's call it, I owned a food truck. I was a concessionaire. So back to my earliest time in high school, I made pottery. I handmade pottery. So I would attend local events, setting up a booth and selling my pottery. And with that, I learned a lot about, commercial vendors and booths and all that sort of fun stuff. And from there, to help pay just for random things during college, I started a food truck. So I traveled all around the Pacific Northwest selling food at different events. So I was a concessionaire. I was a food vendor. So with that, I probably have 8 years of vending experience, maybe 10 years of vending experience. And I've seen a bunch of different events. I've went to great events. I've went to really not so great events. And there's just things that really stick out to me. Events that did things well compared to events that did things kind of poorly, right? And it's funny, I was having a conversation with somebody I used to vend with. She also owns a food truck. And she's like, you need to talk about the vending side of things. You need to talk about events that lie about their attendance. You need to talk about events that treat their vendors really, really well and what they do well. And I'm like thinking to myself, you're right. I do need to talk about that. So in this episode, we're talking about all things vendors, making them happy and how you can create that exceptional experience. Because I know for me, if the communication wasn't great, if I didn't make money, I just wasn't coming back. At the end of the day, you're not selling booth space. You're selling an opportunity for a vendor to make a presence at your event and make money at your event or accomplish a marketing goal of theirs. You're not just selling booth space. So one of my biggest pet peeves in all of this was events that lied about their attendance. And I don't know how much of it was on purpose and how much of it was a mistake. Events that don't have a ticketing platform, you don't really know what your attendance is. You might be using clickers. Well, clickers are horrifically inaccurate. We all know this. And it was more because if you tell me you have 10,000 people at your event and you only have 2,000, I bought food or I bought enough product for 10,000, not 2,000, right? So I brought like 5 times too much. And when you're looking at opportunity, you're trying to pick the best shows. So I get why events lie. They're like, they want to say they have a bigger attendance, they get more vendors in, so they sell more booth space. Like I get that, but you're not going to get them back. After 1 year, they're going to realize that you lied and they're not going to come back. I'm all about creating repeatable actions or repeatable business. And if you lie, they're not going to come back and they're going to give you a bad rap. The vendor community is very, very tight. It's small. Everybody talks. They're going to give you a bad rap. And then you're going to lose even more vendors because you're not going to get new vendors. It's just a rabbit hole. Be authentic, and your attendance should reflect the price. So, smaller attendance, smaller the price, bigger the attendance, bigger the price. Your pricing for your booths should all just be based off of the opportunity size. It's a massive opportunity. People should be paying more for that because it's a great opportunity. I think another big thing is communication. When I was a vendor coordinator, so I've been on both sides. I've been a vendor. I've also been a vendor coordinator for a county fair, Columbia County Fair specifically. And when I was there, I was able to, I think we had 50 booths in the year before. And then when I took over, I was able to get it up to 100 booths. So I doubled the amount of vendors that came in. And with that, and it's funny, I just went back to that fair because I was actually I've not volunteered, but kind of, they don't pay much to be a 4-H judge. So if you're a fair out there, pay your 4-H judges a little bit more, but I was back being the 4-H swine judge, and I was able to see some of those old vendors that I used to manage at that fair. And they came back like, Jake, we really miss you. Like, this isn't good. Are you coming back? Can you come back? And I'm like, unfortunately I can't, just because we're too busy here at Fusion, whatever. But everything that I hear is, and even what I experience was, vendors just want clear communication. They want to constantly be updated about what's happening at the event. They want to know what time their check-in, check-out is. They want to know exactly where their spot is, and you can show that to them on a map before they even get there. Vendors are busy. I remember when I was a vendor, I was constantly on the move. I was driving from city to city. Like, I'd do shows from a Wednesday to a Sunday, tear down Sunday night, drive everything home. Monday, I was cleaning everything out, restocking. Tuesday, I was out the door again, headed to my next event to set up to be open for Wednesday. Like, you're constantly on the move. And by not having information, it just makes your life so much more stressful. So I would say one of the biggest tips is have great communication with your vendors, have clear instructions, set expectations. I'm not gonna lie, I was a hard ass on my vendors. Like, it was great communication, but I had high expectations from you. Every concessionaire had a specific move-in time. Like, this is your 30-minute window to get your stuff in, dropped, and get out. Here's where you're at. There is no negotiations. This is your spot. If you don't like your spot, we can have a conversation about that after this year's event. And they respect that hard line. Vendors respect when they have 100% transparency. They know what to expect, and you just give it to them exactly how it is. No BS. They can deal with that. What vendors can't deal with is things that are constantly changing. Other things to think about with making your vendors happy. Stop doubling up on them. I've seen so many events where they have like 16 Color Street vendors and 10 people selling corn dogs. It's like, okay, great. You have more vendors, but let's say you have 1,000 people that would have bought a corn dog at your event. Well, if there's only one corn dog vendor, that corn dog vendor is going to get all 1,000. The second you bring in 5, now instead of one getting 1,000 and making money, you're going to have 5 people selling 200 corn dogs, and nobody's really going to make any money, right? It's counterintuitive, I know, but from a vendor standpoint, there has to be enough opportunity there for them to actually make money. Vendors have to make money to keep coming back. They're running a business just like you're running your event, which is also a business. The other thing, one thing that drives me absolutely bonkers, is having the right number of vendors. If you have, let's say your attendance is, I was just talking to an event actually this week, and his event is in Florida. It's like a winter lights festival actually. And I think he's going to have like 1,000 people a day over 30 days or something. And he wanted to have, I think, 10 or so food vendors. I'm like, okay, well, help me understand this. Not everybody that comes to your event buys food. I say, let's just say 50% of the people buy food. That might be a low number. It might be high, all different depending on your event. So let's say out of those 1,000, only 500 people buy food. So 500 people divided by 10 vendors at your event. That means each vendor is only going to get 50 customers. 50 customers times, let's say, I don't know, the average check size of $10. They're only making $500 a day. When I'm a vendor, I have to make $1,000 a day or it's not worth my time. For travel, labor, food, everything, it's just not worth my time. You have to have the right amount. So for him, I said, hey, you should have no more than 3 food vendors. And not because you want to limit options, it's because your vendors have to make money. Like, if you have, way too many vendors, nobody's going to make money, and then you're going to make everybody mad. I would rather reject 5 vendors and only have, 3 on site, so I can make those 3 really, really happy, than have all 10 or whatever on site and make them all really, really angry because none of them made decent money. That's my 2 cents on it. That's my feelings towards it when I was a vendor. That's also my firm belief coming from the vendor coordinator side as well. You have to know what that looks like. The other thing is know and understand your applications, right? Like, I was just talking to another vendor at the fair that I used to be a vendor coordinator at, that I was back judging a couple weeks ago. He's like, I put on my application, I need a 10 by 20. They gave me a 10 by 15. While that might be an honest mistake, it happens far too often. Vendors know what size space they need. Like, lay it out. Like, I used to go out with pieces of chalk. This is before we had Fusion. This is before I built, or my team, I didn't build anything. We built Fusion Manager, which actually lets you like lay out all of your booth spaces with like a map. I would go out with chalk and mark everybody's space so I knew that they had enough space and it was in the right space. So when they came in, they knew exactly where their spot was. It was sitting right there in chalk. Wham, bam, you're done. If vendor doesn't have enough space, like, you can't magically make trailers smaller or make tents half the size. Make sure there's enough space. Leave a couple feet in between so they can easily walk between booths. They can easily set up. They're not, touching. Everybody's booth shouldn't be touching all the time. That creates fire and safety hazard galore. That's another big thing. I think too often we put vendors on the back burner. And coming from a guy that started in this industry as a vendor, it sucks because the vendors are the heart and soul of so many events that without them, our events would be half as good, maybe. And they bring so much value and opportunity to your event. It's just interesting, and there's such a big ego I used to see. I think it's changing a little bit, of vendor coordinators of, I'm the vendor coordinator, you do this, you do this. People are tired of that. I remember one of the very best vendor coordinators I ever worked with. Her name was Patty from the North Plains Garlic Festival. She was a straight shooter. She was a kind straight shooter. She told you exactly how it was. If you did something wrong, she was going to tell you, but there was a reason for it. But she was kind and cordial. Like, there was nothing, it wasn't because she wanted to be mean. It was because it needed to operate in this fashion. And that's why. But she talked in a kind tone. She didn't think she was above all the vendors. Like, she was there to ensure that everybody was successful. I remember after my first year there, I think we made like $3,000 or something. And I was kind of bummed, I was hoping to make more than that. And we were talking about it after the event when we were checking out. And she's like, yeah, well, you keep coming back. Your sales are going to get better every single year. This is when I was new to being a concessionaire. I was like, I don't really want to come back again if I'm going to have the same results, but I trusted her. And I went back the second year when we made, I think, like $5,000. So we increased by almost 100%, right? Like, okay, cool. Like, Patty's right. I'm going to keep doing what Patty says. And have the same conversation. Said, yeah, I told you, Jake. I told you you're gonna sell more food year after year. We came back the third year. I think we sold like $8,000 or $10,000 worth of food. I'm like, this is insane. Like, this is so cool. Like, Patty, you were right. Like, thank you so much. I was kind of bummed and down about this opportunity, but you were right. You just got to keep coming back. And this stuff isn't going to happen overnight. And it was all because we had a good relationship. And one of the things that I really prided myself on when I was a vendor coordinator was having that good relationship. Like, yes, you are my vendor at my event. I sold you a booth, but above all else, like, I'm a resource for you, not only to be successful at my show, but if I can help in any way, make sure that you're successful or getting into other shows, writing you a letter of recommendation, like anything I can possibly do to help, I'm all for it. And that's why I have vendors still to this day calling me up, seeing how I'm doing. I walk by like, Jake, it's good to see you. Like, here's some free food. Thank you so much. It's like, just because I had a good relationship with them and I actually cared about them as individuals, as fellow business owners, and people really, really respect that. So I hope you found some value in this. There's one more topic that we could talk about, which is the checkout process. There's a massive missed opportunity. I implemented a checkout process when I was at Columbia Candy Fair. They had one, but I kind of enhanced it just a little bit. And after this, I'm going to talk about the check-in process as well. That's super important. But as far as checking out, after the event, every vendor had to come talk to me before they could leave. I think I called like a make sure your booth was cleaner. I don't know, some baloney. But it was more just say, hey, how did you do? Like, how was the event? Can you give me any feedback? Thank you so much for attending, and just kind of give them a chat. And then afterwards, I sent every vendor a survey. What went well? What didn't go well? What was your favorite part about the event? What was your least favorite part about the event? Will you be coming back next year? If there was one, if you had a magic wand and you could wave it around and one thing could happen, what would that be? I think, what was your best sales day? I mean, we just asked a bunch of different questions, and we had all the vendors fill it out. And it was anonymous. I don't need your name. I don't care either. And it's an opportunity for them to be candid and anonymous about giving you feedback. Because if you're not asking your vendors are your customers. At the end of the day, your vendors are your customers. If you're not asking them for your feedback, or for their feedback, you're just making decisions blindly, and you have no idea like if those are even what needs to happen, or if it's what your vendors actually want and need. So big thing for there. Check-in process is another thing that I see events doing could improve on. When I was vendor coordinator, I made check-in packets. So every single vendor had like a 9x13 manila envelope, and it had in there the event program. It had the schedule of the event. It had all of their credentials, wristbands. It had some swag like stickers, pens, different things like that. It had an emergency contact sheet, like who to contact if you need this, who to contact if you need that. It gave them a map of the event, so where everything was. And it was basically just you walk up, hey, I'm here to check in. Great. I walked them to their spot. I showed them exactly where their spot was, where their boundaries were, where their outlets were, water was. I handed them their move-in packet, said, take a look in there. There's a lot of resources you're going to find help. Oh, I put a frequently asked questions sheet in there as well. Because here's a big thing is attendees are always asking your vendors for information. They just walk up to them and say, hey, where's the bathroom? Hey, where's this? Well, instead of the vendors not knowing, just give them the information so they can answer those questions, right? So every vendor knew where the bathrooms were. Every vendor knew what the schedule was. If an attendee walked up and said, hey, you know what time this band is playing, or do you know what time this speaker's going? The attendee could say, hey, hold on, I can answer that question for you. Yeah, 7 p.m., stage 1, it's going to be in hall A or whatever. I gave them all the information so that they not only knew what was happening, but they could also ensure that our attendees were having an exceptional experience while they were there. And it also makes the booths look good. You know, if you walk up to a booth, you ask them a question, they answer it, you're like, oh, thanks. You had a good experience with that booth now. So now you're helping that vendor, that exhibitor. So a ton of different little things you can do. Again, these things they don't cost you money. I mean, maybe buying some manila envelopes will cost you $20, but they're just small little things that really move the needle. And I saw a big difference when I personally did them. And I saw a big difference in our revenue from our vendors and exhibitors. And it's something that I'm very passionate about, being that I come from the vendor and exhibitor side. I was a vendor coordinator, and I'm passionate in sharing that knowledge with other events that sell booths and stuff like that. So you guys are creating great experiences. You're giving great opportunities for your vendors and exhibitors, and you're giving them your best. And that's what vendors really deserve. So that's my take on how to make your vendors and exhibitors more happy. Hope you found massive value in this episode. Something I'm very passionate about, like I said, something I could talk about for probably hours and hours and hours. We'll keep this one short though. Have any questions, you can always leave them in the comments. We're always happy to help answer those. Until next time, fellow event organizers, we'll see you next week, Wednesday, 5 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, every single Wednesday. Keep leveling up. Love to see it. Love to see all your comments. Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of Event Academy Live.
Thank you for listening to the Event Academy Live podcast.
This show is powered by Fusion.
Event solutions for the modern event organizer. Don't forget to like, rate, and review. We hope you enjoyed the show. Until next week, keep leveling up, fellow event organizers.